I want to say this. This may be one of the best compliments you'll ever get. I think you would have deserved that because you would have drawn the ire of a government that is completely out of control, and I believe your voice is becoming that strong that, quite frankly, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice now. Be very careful and watch yourself because you are having that kind of an effect. And when people start and begin to have an effect, if it's not singing to the choir, it's a real problem. But having said that, we were talking before about the Internal Revenue Service. And I'm like everybody else in the country, seeing the headline news and the fiasco and the tragedy that struck Austin. But, when you look at the Internal Revenue Service, they have evoked over the years fear and abuse. In fact, they've testified, Alex, before the Congress of the United States that without fear, they wouldn't have their voluntary, quote-unquote, voluntary compliance. Well, let me tell you something. Fear has no place in the Constitution of the United States or in the fabric of American government. And we've got a real problem. Now, in 1998, I was the individual responsible for changing the burden of proof in a civil tax case. As I said earlier, I want to tip my hat to a Texan, Mr. Bill Archer. Mr. Bill Archer was the Republican chairman of Ways and Means Committee, and the trafficking language was not in the bill, that reform bill, because the IRS had threatened a veto to President Clinton if it contained the trafficking language. Well, after the bill passed the House, I got a call from Chairman Archer, and he said, we have so much support for your bill that he said he was going to put it in the conference committee between the House and the Senate, and he did. And I honestly believe this, and I want the people of Texas who are listening to hear this, that I believe if President Bush would have named Bill Archer his Secretary of Treasury, America would not be in the fix it's in today. Now, having said that, what the trafficking bill basically said was this. Up until 98, Alex, you had an agency that says, Alex, you owe us $50,000. And you say, my God, how could I owe you $50,000? And they say, well, prove you don't, Alex. The burden of proof, you see, was on the taxpayer. The trafficking language changed that. And in 98, when the bill passed, they did a study 1 year after the passage of the bill, Alex, and they compared 1 year before the passage to 1 year after the passage. And there were three salient points of concern that were covered by their study. The first one was wage garnishment. When the burden of proof was on the taxpayer, there were 3.1 million Americans whose wages were garnished. The following year, with the burden of proof on the Internal Revenue Service, that dropped to 561,000, 3 million less, Alex. The second category was property liens. There were 670,000 the year before, 161,000 the year after. And the final category was individual family-owned homes that were seized, taken by the IRS. The year before, when the taxpayer had the burden of proof, it was 10,073. The year after, it was 57, Alex. One per state when they had to prove it. You see, one of the last measures that I had, and it really was upsetting, and Chairman Archer said he liked the bill. Well, I teamed up with two Republicans, Billy Tozan of Louisiana and Dan Schaefer of Colorado, and it was the flat tax, the fair tax, a straight consumption tax. And let me tell you something. It repeals the 16th Amendment and throws out the IRS. It abolishes all withholding, all debt taxes, all capital gains taxes, corporate taxes, individual tax on expenses for education, investment tax. And it's about time, Alex. And what everybody's saying, well, you're going to put a 25% consumption tax on us, Traficant, and you're going to bankrupt everybody with these cost increases. Listen to the study that was performed in Harvard. They said when you throw out this burdensome tax code that has destroyed companies and destroyed our competitiveness, they said they will have downward movement to gain market share. Sounds like capitalism all over again. And they predict that the prices would hardly raise, if at all. And you'll have Social Security fully funded, Medicare fully funded, and you'll have the same neutral, if not more, revenue stream than we have now. But the bottom line is, you see, Alex, it's time to reward work. Our tax code is basically a progressive communist tax code that was founded by Karl Marx. And here's how it works. The harder you work, the more you pay. The harder you work, you get hit over the head. We subsidize illegitimacy. We reward dependency. We kill investment. We chase companies overseas. These companies, they say they're not patriots because they left America. The reason they left is the tax code has made it impossible to make a profit in America. We've got to change it. Scrap it. Throw the Internal Revenue Service out. Abolish the withholding.
Absolutely.
And that's where we got to go, Alex. And let me say this briefly about this man in Texas. From what I understand, he was not a wacko. He had it. And there's so many people that had it, and it's not unusual to see him venting at the Internal Revenue Service. My God, Congress of the United States is derelict in their duties to not repeal the 16th Amendment, throw out individual personal tax, reward a man for his labor, not punish him. And that's where we got to go, Alex. That's exactly where we got to go.
Well, look at Geithner, and most of the White House don't pay their taxes, but then the news is saying, look at this tax cheat, Joe Stack. He's scum, but then the big boys, they don't even have to pay the tax.
Well, this is one of the problems. You have selective enforcement in all areas. First of all, we need a whole address to our central government. This is the United States of America, not the central government of America. And states, quite frankly, Alex, have become background music in a doctor's office. And I think one of the biggest mistakes ever made was the amendment to the Constitution that provided for popular votes for the U.S. Senate. I know this might sound different off the beat, but
we need the 17th Amendment back.
Here's what I'm saying.
We need to get rid of it.
In the old days, those two U.S. senators were beholding to the state legislature in the respective states. If they didn't do what the states wanted, they replaced them. Now you got these senators that are basically senators for America. We've lost states' rights. We've taken away. We've developed this big central powerful government that has molded us. My God, we got a tax code that's become a behavior modification for economic activity. This is crazy, Alex. And I think it's not rocket science. There can be tremendous changes here. And it's not change that's needed, it's replacement. And I think, and I will make this statement on your show, if the United States does not throw out the progressive income tax and replace it with a fair tax, America will implode similar to the Soviet Union. It's just a matter of time with that debt approaching $14 trillion we can't satisfy. We're nothing more than a managed debt economy nation.
Congressman James Traficant, this is powerful information, but I also want to get into your persecution, why you were persecuted, who was behind it. Was it the Israeli lobby? Was it the IRS? Was it a combination? We're going to break that down, and how if you can be persecuted like a heretic, this can happen to anybody. But finishing up with the whole income tax, they're raising all these other state taxes, local taxes, federal taxes, everything starting to go bankrupt. Foreign banks are openly looting us. Paulson can give $200 million of bailout money to himself and give himself a waiver, and then nobody even knows why James Traficant went to jail, completely made up. Same thing with governor in Alabama. I mean, this is amazing. But specifically, looking at this, how long do you think America has till it completely collapses if this out-of-control government continues?
I think I would say this. I would say I can't predict an exact time, but I will say this. I think it is inevitable, and I think it will be within the next generation, the next 20 to 25 years, where America will implode, and certain states will move towards saving their own revenue and moving off on their own, maybe a compact of states. I could see a state like Alaska with their own revenue stream bigger than most of the countries in landmass over in Europe saying, hey, we're on our own, guys. And I could see this starting to happen. I think Georgia legislature has advanced an initiative stating that they'll collect the federal tax, but they won't send it to Washington.
Yes, sir. Let me just add, Congressman Traficant, that 30-plus states are moving to declare 9th and 10th Amendment powers, as you know, and the federal government itself has been hijacked by offshore banks, and I think it's going to happen a lot sooner than just 20 years. And so Northcom and Homeland Security, we got their internal Homeland Security documents a year ago. We broke this. We got it from law enforcement, where Homeland Security internally, they train the police. This is really to suppress the American people. This is not about fighting Arabs in caves.
No doubt. There's once I think the headline that all Americans may expect, I hope it doesn't happen, but God forbid it does, is they'll wake up one morning and they'll hear conversation on your show, Alex, about the dollar crashing. And when that dollar crashes, you will see an implosion in America. You'll see civil uprisings. You will see a massive hemorrhage of the institutions of the United States of America.